Very good. So, welcome back, Elena, to Raw and Cooked Vegan for part 2. Thank you so much for your time. We had gotten just to the end of your story, and I think you told me you had found this osteopathic doctor who would actually work, you know, miracle of miracles, work with you. So, so could you just finish the end of that? So once you started working with him,
I'll make it quick. So we went to see him. I brought my research, and we agreed on the issue that I researched was B12 relationship to infertility and other problems. And so I brought my research, and he didn't even know how to honestly spell methylcobalamin, you know, the form of B12. I asked him for a prescription, and what was great about him, he realized and he understood that B12 is a water-soluble vitamin, which means you cannot really go wrong with it, you cannot overdose with it. And once I submitted my lab work, which his lab was right next door, so I got my labs done, and he wrote out a prescription. And while I was waiting for my lab results, I started my injections like 2 days after that because I had to find a pharmacy that would make methylcobalamin form of B12, because in America, most of the pharmacies only carry the cyanocobalamin form. So there are 3 different forms, and methylcobalamin is the best and most best used by your body because the body no longer has to produce the methyl particle to absorb it. And cyanocobalamin is only 50% as effective. So I went for, you know, whatever is going to give me the most effect, most outcome very quickly. And the best thing was 4 weeks into injections, and both my husband and I went into injections because B12 affects not only the female fertility, but also male sperm count and sperm motility. So I got him on injections. When we got results, my levels were like mid-200s and his were mid-300s. By the lab standards, by the 8 people who they've done the research on, those were like acceptable levels. But in reality, we were both deficient, not severely deficient, but severely enough for me not to be able to conceive. So I'm off medication.
Okay, let me clarify that. So at a level of 200, you feel that's not adequate for conceiving.
Oh, it's not that I feel it. I know it's not adequate. And so, well, for me, it was not good enough for conceiving. And here's the thing with B12. B12 is literally involved in creating the very DNA of your body. It's in every cell of your body. So if it's missing, it can malfunction different in different people. For me, it was infertility. For some, it can be sleep disorders. I also used to have horrific sweat spells that I would just sweat during the day for no reason. But that was also after effect of the medication that I used to suppress lactation for my pituitary. For others, it can be Parkinson's and Alzheimer-like symptoms. They would be forgetful. For other people, it would be burning and nerve spasms. I had nerve spasms. So I had several of the symptoms of a deficiency. My doctors, which amazes me, I went to naturopaths, and I used to pay like $300 for a visit. I went to medical doctors. Nobody ever bothered to ever test me for B12.
Even though they knew you were vegan.
Well, and this is a part of the myth, though. People think that you can be B12 deficient only if you're vegan. Here's the problem. Once you're over the age of 50, you're deficient no matter what, because the gut is overworked, especially if you're eating an omnivorous diet, because the acidity level in your stomach is raised. So you are lacking those things. So while there's this myth that only vegans get B12 deficiency, and people knew I was vegan, it would have behooved, all of us to test me. But what I found in my family, people had symptoms of B12 deficiency. All were omnivores, but they were so at certain levels. And if you're on certain medications like birth control, or if you've ever been under anesthesia of any kind, you might possibly be B12 deficient. And there are several medicines, the inhalators. They will do that, and a lot of things that will cause a B12 deficiency. So it is not isolated for vegan population only.
Right, right. Well, the point I was making is I totally agree with you, and I've heard that argument before, but it's surprising considering that in the popular consciousness, vegans are recognized as being B12 deficient, and here you had these doctors not even considering it as a possibility.
And I'm telling you, 2 naturopaths. One naturopath he is an instructor at the Portland. There's some kind of, I can't remember, naturopathic medicine school, basically. He was a professor there, and he was specializing in female health, so female fertility. And I'll never forget, I walked into his office and he cries with me as I'm telling him my story. And I was like, stop crying, just help me. He's like, I'm going to help you get pregnant. And then he tries all these crazy protocols on me that literally put me back into depression because we overcompensated on certain things. But never once did he say, okay, were you ever tested for B12? Let's look at your levels. And it was striking. So eventually I go and I get tested, and I take my time to write to him. This is a naturopath, mind you now. So I got tested, and now here's the miracle. 4 weeks after injections, we get pregnant.
Wow.
Like on the dot, 4 weeks almost to the day. So I email him and I'm telling him, here are the things. Why did you ever not say it? He said, well, unless you have this, a genetic mutation, it's known as MHTFR, I think, then you'd have to get tested for that. I'm like, no. Actually, I emailed him before I found this doctor because I wanted somebody who knew me to work with. And I was like, no, that's not the only way you can get deficient, because there's so many. I've been through several surgeries in my life, so all of those things could have compounded. Now, one thing that saved me, I think, is going vegan, because I had to get educated on vegan nutrition and what we should take, if we should take supplements. And that one thing actually saved me, because if I didn't know ongoingly, I could have ended up with, my father passed away from Parkinson's. And we don't know. He was never tested. We don't know if it was a B12 deficiency that was mistaken for Parkinson's. Maybe it was Parkinson's.
Yeah, that's interesting. You said earlier one of the symptoms you had was a nervous expression.
Yes.
How did that manifest?
Oh, so if you don't take care of it for a long time, and I had it for over 9 years before it was tended to, it became permanent nerve damage. And so now it improved after I went in on injections. But, so I would have twitches right here in my neck, my forehead, my arms. So basically a lot of my right side was affected to where I would feel, for example, I would have to do this, like pull it and relax it for the spasm to release itself. And it's uncomfortable, and you can't just, I wouldn't say especially because I'm a woman, but women tend to be more conscious of their body and appearance. It's not something that you want either way, whether you're a man or a woman, but it stayed with me. It improved a lot. It was really bad. It was to the point that inside my ear, the spasm was going on and it was affecting my hearing.
Wow.
So thankfully that went away for me. So now I have spasm mostly when I don't get enough rest. So if I'm underslept, overworked, so if I'm tired and if there's too much pressure, so if there's too much going on, I'm under pressure, it expresses itself more. So when I'm more relaxed and I'm in a groove of things, it's not as noticeable, but it's still there.
Okay. And let me ask you, prior to this diagnosis, prior to actually finally taking a B12 test and knowing that it was that issue, were you taking a B12 supplement?
Yes.
And how much were you taking?
I was taking an average about 250 micrograms that they come in. The suggested recommended daily value is like 2.5 to 4 micrograms that you would take. So I thought, well, 250, I'm like once a week is good enough. I mean, that's what you hear. And unfortunately, as vegans and as a society in general, we're very undereducated about this. I was talking, for example, C-section can affect women, cause a deficiency because of medication. And one of my sisters was going through deep depression. This, I think, was like almost nervous breakdown. And I said, you should really get tested and do B12. And she would not trust me on it because I was not a doctor. And then I was telling her how I give my child a daily B12. And then she said, well, recommended value is 4 micrograms. I need to figure out what would be for a child of, my daughter's age. I'm like, you're totally missing the point. And a lot of people do think that we need to break it down. And what we found is people who are educated on the topic, they will tell you that you need at least 1,000 micrograms a day. And there's a science that's why it's at least 1,000. I'm not going to get into that. It's too lengthy of a topic. But it should be at least 1,000 because some of it gets absorbed, some of it excreted through urine, some of it stays, some of it does not store. But to cover all of the bases, we take 1,000 micrograms daily or at least every other day in a form of methylcobalamin, because a lot of people might have eventual reaction to cyanocobalamin because it has cyanide in it. That's what's called cyanocobalamin.
Right.
But yeah, we're undereducated. And when I talk to vegans, believe it or not, this really, really bothered me at one time. I got pregnant. I had my baby. And I'm not going to name the name of this publication, but it was Vegan Magazine. And we were talking, and they wanted to feature my story, and I told, like, gave them bullet points what I would talk about in the article. And one of them was about B12, because I'm all about educating people, all about saving another woman or another man from the same kind of thing. And the editor of the magazine said, well, I would not want you to talk about B12 because I don't believe this is the cause of your problem. Now, mind you, an outsider who does not know my medical history is passing an opinion, says, I don't think you got pregnant because of B12. I've never taken a B12, she said, in my life, and I've been vegan for 20 years. And I sat there and I thought, this is the reason why so many people try to be vegan, and when they don't succeed is because there's lack of education on the topic. They quit and they say, this is the wrong kind of diet for humanity. We cannot do it right, so we have to do it other way. So I think there's misinformation, miseducation. And if we take care of that, then I think more of humanity can feel safer about switching over to a vegan diet and saying, I'm going to get whatever my body needs from a vegan diet without having any deficiencies.
Very interesting. Okay. So, and that methylcobalamin that you take now, 1,000 micrograms either daily or at the very least every other day, is a sublingual tablet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I know there are certain forms. There's sublinguals, there are drops you can take, there are patches you can put on. I really only tried sublingual because it tastes good. It tastes basically like a vitamin. It's easy to absorb. It goes, the reason we take it sublingual is we hold it under the tongue. It goes into the body through your salivary glands.
Yeah.
Bypasses the stomach. The stomach will still go through the stomach, and that's why we take 1,000 micrograms, because some of it is lost. I haven't tried the liquids, the patches, to know whether they're effective or not. They're out there, but for me, it's very convenient. You just pop it in your mouth. My kid loves the taste. Now, when I have sometimes clients come to me and they have autistic kids and they have textural issues, so they cannot like take certain foods in their mouth, then they would go for a liquid, and it would be like in their food that they love and they're kind of hiding. And that works too. But as far as patches, I'm not sure if they work or not.
All right, and just to get back to this recovery that you experienced, you got the diagnosis, you started getting those shots. Did you administer these shots yourself, or did you have a nurse do it? And how long did you take the shots?
Right. So from my research, and I think Patrol is her last name. So could it be B12 writer, the author? Yeah. She went to give research. She is non-vegan. She's an omnivore, but she had the genetic mutation where she had to have injections or she would have died eventually. So it got so severe for her. And she said she used to be one of those people, like a paleo eater, almost take every time, but she was deficient. So through her research and others, that's how I got educated. She recommends that when you're extremely deficient, you go through at least 6 months of a treatment. So if you don't have a genetic mutation, which would require for you to take injections, is the best way to go. Then she says if you're extremely deficient, and from other sources I found out 6 months treatment at least. And we do it. So in the beginning, we found out you're deficient, your doctor is working with you to give you injections. We do first weeks every day, 1,000 microgram injections. Then for the rest of the month, because it's cheaper to buy it that way, we do 1 injection every week. So it's for 3 weeks. And then after that, at least bi-weekly, I find optimal. Some people did only once a month. The benefit of injections is that the injection stays in the muscle. And the benefit of that is that you can actually self-inject, because if it was a vein, the doctors would not let you do it. But inserting in the muscle, so we use the arm size and the leg size. And I usually did myself on rotation sometimes since I'm a righty, when it was on my left arm, my husband would help me inject. But I had only 1 lesson from a nurse. I went and I paid for the appointment. She showed me how to do it. I got my husband, and we helped each other and self-injected. And it was very easy to get. The needle is very tiny, so it's not very long, and it's also very thin, so it's a prickle, given. Yeah. But to compare to the symptoms I had in the fertility I suffered with, that was a teeny price to pay. Now, as for how long, I stayed for the recommended 6 months on it, and then because I was pregnant, I decided I was going to take the best care of myself possible, and my doctor had no problem prescribing it. So I continued it through my pregnancy and for at least another 6 months when I had the baby. So babies get their B12 through the mother's milk. So that is one of the things. If you're not nursing your baby, you have to supplement them if they're bottle fed. And if you're nursing your baby, you really always have to get tested to make sure you're not B12 deficient, because if you're deficient, your baby will be deficient. And childhood B12 deficiencies can become severe and cause not only growth deficiencies, but developmental deficiencies. And those are the kind of things you want to avoid for your child altogether.
All right, so it's obvious that you are an excellent resource on this topic, and we probably could spend the whole hour on this. I'm just going to ask you one more question, which is, after a month of taking these shots, you then became pregnant. So obviously, it seems that that's the direct reason for that. Were there other benefits you noticed from introducing B12 at that level?
Absolutely. So for me, one of the things that I developed was a geographic tongue. And if you're familiar with that, if you eat something, then like parts of your tongue can be on fire and it looks funny, like you actually have countries left out on your tongue. I had that problem, especially when I ate anything that it was higher acidity. And by acidity, I mean just sour food. So tomatoes, lemons, lemon juice, that gets on my tongue. Walnuts, I had bad pineapple, those kind of things. So I couldn't have much. That improved to where I have no problem. Now, I tend to overdo. I love tomatoes, so that's still, I guess, too much of any good thing is just too much. So that went away. I stopped sweating, so sweats kind of improved for me. And then I also added magnesium. Magnesium deficiency can cause night sweats, for example, so that stopped. Then I slept better. The insomnia went away, and the pituitary medication I was on caused for me to become hypothyroid again. One of the things I found through research is a lot of people with hypothyroidism are B12 deficient or low on B12. So when I got off medication, and my thyroid, and it was not that elevated. It was just like over 2 or right around 3 at that point. Not a big change. But my new doctor, so my osteopath, says, well, if you want your baby to be healthy and if you don't want to have a brain damaged baby, you have to go on thyroid medication. And at first I'm like, this is the pregnancy I waited for like 8 years. I freak out. I cry for a day. And then I was like, okay, I need to go for a drive. I went for a drive, breathed through it. I reversed it once. Who said I cannot do it again? But now, besides just a plant-based diet that was healing, I have another tool in my belt, which was B12. So literally, I got retested for thyroid within a month, and it was in the normal range.
Very interesting.
So that is very important.
In your studies, did you find that B12 has any role in proper bone development? So you know, we always hear about calcium, and you just mentioned magnesium and vitamin D. Is B12 at all factor into that?
You know, it's one of the things I don't remember. I can look it up there quickly. What I've done is when I was doing my research, I created a series of like 6 or 8 blog posts on B12 deficiencies. Okay. And I went around the books that I could find, and I went around the internet, and I took everybody's research and I mashed it together and added my end. And I made a very comprehensive list, and actually have an ebook on my website that's available on B12.
That's great. That's great. So I'm not going to make you do that now. So we'll look into that. Let me, since we're here in the kind of vitamin arena, let me just quickly ask you, are there any other vitamins you supplement with? And I'm kind of particularly interested in vitamin D.
No, I do not supplement with anything at all. And here's the reason. Everything else that we need is found in plant foods, and in much better quality and quantity than you can ever find it. And of course, processed foods are stripped away of any nutrition. Animal foods don't really have anything that we cannot create on our own. And here's the reason why. We primarily, as humans, consume, you don't, but humans consume mostly herbivores, animals. Some of them are, can be carnivorous or omnivorous too. It depends what they're fed at the factory. But overall, if you look at pigs and cows, they're out there grazing on grass. Now, imagine a calf is born and grows from this little being to a huge cow or bull within like a year, and that comes from their mother's milk and grass. Now, if they can do that, develop that kind of muscle and no deficiencies on grass alone, why can't we do it ourselves? Because we're also an animal, in a sense. So if we are consuming them they only can produce what they eat in their diet. They don't have a magic formula to produce B12 or vitamin D or anything else in them. So vitamin D, if the animal gets out in the sun, it's collected off of the animal. Well, why don't I get out in the sun to produce my own vitamin D? And I'll touch on that in a second. But when it comes to other nutrition, so the animal goes, it's plants, corn right now, wheat, that's what they're mostly fed because those are subsidized crops.
Right.
And they're fed junk a lot of times. And then on top of that, you get steroids and you get hormones and everything else. Why don't we skip the middleman? And instead of cow consuming plants, then giving leftovers to you, why don't we go and do what the cow does and tend to our own health? That's my thing. Let's skip the middleman. Well, not the middleman, the middle cow, but we really don't. We don't need it. And if animals can do it, look at elephants. They're herbivores completely. Look at their size. None of them is running around saying, I need a protein shake or, I need vitamins so and so. That doesn't happen. And the reason that animals, well, they should not be, they're not vitamin B12 deficient is B12 comes as a, basically it comes from bacteria that you can find on the ground, on the plants. The cows, they graze on it, dirt comes in, and then their stomach can convert to B12, right? Well, humans used to have no problem with B12 when we planted our own foods, when we brought foods from outside, and we didn't overwash them, we didn't overspray them, we picked them, we rinsed them, we ate them. There was all the B12 that we needed, we created from that bacteria.
Yeah.
Well, now we go to the supermarket, it's not only not organic, it's commercially raised, but some of it is genetically modified, it's overwashed, it's oversprayed. And so we're missing that factor that would help us to take that bacteria and convert it into a usable form of B12 in our own gut.
Yeah, I've seen some accounts that say that the water, natural water, because it's running through soil, had B12 in the water.
Yeah.
But
yeah, those are the reasons I don't supplement with anything except for B12. And it had been more of like a gardener and I raised my own food. I probably would not supplement it. There was a study done, I think it was in Iran or somewhere, where there's a group of people that they use human waste as manure to plant their foods. And their B12 levels, nobody was deficient. They were plant eaters.
Interesting.
So go figure. So because B12 deficiency comes through that, it's better to be safe than sorry. So we supplement with B12. Now, vitamin D, I have a huge issue with supplementation because a lot of times when people supplement, it's done for the wrong reasons. And I'm going to touch on it very quickly, but I have a huge article on this with like 20 scientific references. Usually go to a doctor, they see if your level comes under 30, they'll say, oh, you're deficient supplement. Well, there was a presentation done, I think, before the Congress, and there was research done, multi-researchers put together. They established that anything between 20 and 30 is an acceptable range. But you go to a doctor, they say, oh, that's what my doctor told me. I was like a 25 or something before I got pregnant. And she's like, you should really supplement. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, that's why I look into things. But what we do is we go outside barely because we're in our offices, we're in our homes, we're in our cars. We don't walk outside as we do overseas. We don't work out outside. We come home and God forbid we had a sweat anywhere, we broke sweat. We go and wash everything out. So people go sunbathe, put sunblock on them. Much good did the sun do except for frying you up. And then the moment you get in the house, you wash everything out. But it takes about 2 to 3 hours. And vitamin D is actually a hormone. So for that hormone to become usable in your body, to absorb into your skin. So it settles on your skin, in the droplets of oils we have. It takes a couple of hours to absorb it. So what we've done as this developed progressive society is we overwash our food and we overwash ourselves. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't like being stinky any more than anybody else. But if we go outside, we need for light-skinned people, 15 minutes every day in the sun to expose our arms, face, and legs. Dark, medium range color skin people would need about twice as much. And the darker you are, the more you need. So my husband would need about 45 minutes in the sun every day to store enough for the winter months.
And am I right in thinking that where you live, you have easy access to the outdoors all year round?
Well, I didn't always live in a house. Right now, I own a house with half an acre, but I used to live in apartments. What you can do is you can go for a walk at the park.
Right, but I mean the climate. I mean your climate year round.
Washington State is overcast more than like about 8 months out of the year.
Okay.
But the moment the sun is out there, we're outside soaking it up. And I'm telling you, none of us have a deficiency because we are purposeful. You know, we had rain for the whole week. And today the sun came out and my daughter and I were outside. I was gardening. She was playing in the sun. It's our job to make sure that we're not deficient. What happens when we don't do our job is the doctor sends us to the bottle, and the bottle comes with side effects. And the side effects of vitamin D are sometimes more severe than side effects of a deficiency of vitamin D.
Yeah. It's interesting. Dr. McDougall has a video on this, and he talks about a study that was done where folks who were taking vitamin D actually had more, usually senior citizens are recommended to do this for bone health, and they were falling. They were actually having nervous system issues because of excessive vitamin D. So, and it's kind of interesting that they call it vitamin D. As you indicated, it's a hormone. And whenever there's taking of hormones, I'm kind of get a little bit wary. I did myself start taking vitamin D over the past year for about 6 months because I felt like my teeth didn't feel quite right. But I'm not happy about it. So I don't know that I want to keep doing it. But I am one of these people who's probably not eating enough greens. So
yeah, you really always should look. Why are you having a problem? Not like so. I get a lot of angry emails every now and then. It's like you're wrong. I took vitamin D, or I took fish oil and it helped me. And my mentor, Dr. Pam Popper, she was the one behind the Forks Over Knives, and now she's a mini documentary. She's my mentor, and she has the saying: "Feeling better does not equal getting better." So you might have a temporary improvement in your condition, but it does not mean that your body is doing better. So it's like when people go on a paleo diet, they get all the junk out of their diet, but they think it's because they quit carbs like potatoes and pasta or whatever else, where in fact it was the junk that they took out. So they feel great for like 3 months, 6 months, they're losing weight, but then because they're over-consuming protein, now their body, their liver and their kidneys are overwhelmed, and the body's trying to convert protein into carb-like substances to be usable, and now the body begins to shut down. So the same thing happens with fish oil and with vitamin D. Yeah, in the beginning you might have a spike, you're feeling a little bit better, but what we always look at is what is the after effect long term. Yeah. And we also look at is what is the foundational issue? How can we address the problem that is causing you to have a deficiency? There was a study done, and it's the last thing I'll mention about vitamin D, but people with elevated blood pressure came into the hospital. And they had all the lab tests done, and vitamin D was one of them. And they showed us deficient. Well, they stay in the hospital to get the blood pressure down, and they give them medication. Blood pressure goes down. They retest them within like 2 or 3 hours. And amazingly, their vitamin D levels went up, but they've never stepped outside to be in the sun or did not take a supplement. So the conclusion of that study was that one ailment can cause another deficiency in the body, or basically suppress that production of vitamin D inside the body into usable form.
Yeah. This kind of points us back to a book which you alluded to earlier, which is Whole by Campbell. And of course, if we look at the body holistically, you come to the conclusion you can't pull these nutrients out individually. You've got to have them all working together. As soon as you take one out, the whole thing gets screwed up. Yeah. So, yeah. I love it. So the only thing you supplement with is vitamin B12. Otherwise, it's just from your food. And on this food issue, you mentioned carbs, and this is such a big kind of discussion between paleo advocates and vegans. Can you tell us a little bit about your take on carbs, or starches, as Dr. McDougall calls them, and also can you relate that to fruit and how you incorporate these into your diet?
Absolutely. Interestingly, I just did a podcast on it, published it today. It went out. So I quick will tell you. So I was in my top shape when I got pregnant, through pregnancy, when I had the baby, and then I ended up with a prolapse, which basically my bladder decided to come outside, and really I couldn't lift anything, I couldn't work out, I couldn't barely walk. It took me almost 2 years to find a solution to make it livable and workable. Another 2 years to come, to grips, how am I going to go forward? So in the process, I gained almost 20 pounds. And to me, it was like, people don't notice it as much, but to me, I notice it, and that's what matters, right? Now, I ate excellent. My diet is impeccable. I take my B12, I exercise, and I don't sleep enough. That's one of the other problems. But the thing is, because I don't move, for some reason, your body just, it starts compounding the pounds back in the body. So I decided, because I was working out faithfully and my weight is not moving, and sometimes that's when I take my clients sometimes on a little cleanse. So yesterday I decided I'll go on a green juice cleanse, or just a lot of green salads, a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of raw foods basically. And I was at the store grocery shopping, and I ran into my niece, who is trying to lose extra 10 pounds, interestingly, but she is doing the paleo diet. And I never tell people my opinion, or, here's what you should know, until they ask me. But this time I was bad. I was like, don't do it. You're going to regret it. And I was like, oops, too late. So I was like, I apologize. I said, whatever you're going to do, I wish you good luck. And I got home and I did a podcast on it so I could get it off my chest. But here's the problem. People don't understand how the body works. When we hear about the new fad diet, like the paleo, it feeds into our desires. As a society, we love meat, we love dairy, we love fats. Guess what the paleo says? You can have more of them. And then it gives you bogus science and says, here are the reasons why. Well, I always tell people, whenever you look at any diet, including a vegan diet or a paleo diet, ask yourself, does it make common sense? I mean, does it pass the test of common sense? For thousands or millions of years, if you believe in evolution, if you don't, for thousands of years, humans have been eating a plant-based diet. And that's where we can talk about paleo, because it's bogus science. And we were doing just fine. There were only two problems. There was a lack of nutrition in certain areas, like sometimes in certain African countries right now. And so there were diseases of poverty. It's just not enough nutrition or not enough variety.
Malnutrition,
Yeah. On the other hand, you had the rich people who could indulge in the things that poor people couldn't. And they were the ones who developed gout and cancers and diabetes. That was the diseases of affluence, which America is suffering from. None of us have a disease of poverty because we don't get enough nutrients. We consume too much food. That's our problem. So we're all, we have rich people diseases here. So with that said, I mean, if you look at history proves itself that paleo makes no sense. Now, let's look at science. And that's why McDougall is right. He calls it starches, we call it carbs. It doesn't matter. And I think the misnomer here is people, when they hear carbs, they're thinking about donuts and, fries and whatever else.
Right.
What we need to be clear about is they're processed carbs and they're healthy carbs that are the fruit and the potatoes and other things. And here's the thing, even white flour, if you take it by itself, that has more nutrients in it than coconut oil, for example, because coconut oil only has fat in it. That's why we don't use fats in our diet. But if you take that by itself, white flour is not harmful. The science has proven that people who eat white bread are not really killing themselves. What is killing them is if you take that white flour, add sugar to it, deep fry it, and make a donut out of it, that's really going to screw you up. Or if you take a beautiful white potato that is so good in Russians in like Siberia, in that area, that is one of the crops that they can produce and thrive on, because not much grows in the cold lands of Siberia.
Yeah.
For thousands of years, humanity, or if not for hundreds of thousands, has done just fine. But now we're coming and we're saying white potatoes are bad for you. You shouldn't eat white potatoes. Well, it's really the company that the potatoes are keeping. Deep fry the potatoes and you shouldn't be really eating. Or we don't take skin off of our potatoes. We consume the fiber and then good stuff. And again, common sense, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I was a fitness trainer until I ended up with prolapse. And when I was studying for my license for my certification, the book that I was using, and this is as non-vegan as it comes, they're talking about everything else. They were mentioning that humans were made to be basically carbivores in a sense, that our diet should be at least 60% carbs and against protein and fats. Well, looking at the science, we'll go to World Health Organization, and that's really trusted organization, right? They put a lot of studies together. They tell the humanity how to eat and what to do to be healthy. About 20-some years ago or 30 years ago, they used to recommend only 2.5% to about 5% of your diet should be coming from protein sources. And just to give you an idea, mother's milk is about 5% protein.
Yeah.
I mean, really. And then only like 20, 30 years ago, under the pressure from the animal manufacturing organizations, from lobbyists, they increased that number. They almost doubled it. They say 5 is your minimum. If you're pregnant or lactating, it should be about 7, 7.5. And most people, half of humanity is not lactating at least, right? They're not men and they're not carrying babies. Right. So what they're saying is about 5% of your diet. So if you take 100, totality of our diet, subtract the 5%, now we're left with 95%. So this is just very simple math. Now, then we're looking at micronutrients. So it's carbs, proteins, and fat. Or if taking care of proteins, now we're looking at fats. The nurses study was a big study. It was done on nurses, and they were looking at a low-fat diet, and they described it as anything under 30% was low-fat. Right. And they reduced diet to 25% fat. There was no improvement, and they said low-fat diet doesn't really work. It's not beneficial. Well, hello, if you're eating or smoking 5 packs of cigarettes and go to 4, it's not really a big improvement, right? Right. So the new science has shown that if you get your fat intake under 15%, so 15% or lower, you can avoid the coronary problems and other issues in your life and your health. So 5 for protein, 15 for fat, that's 20. That leaves 80% that needs to be filled with the last remaining macronutrient, which is starch or complex carbohydrate. It's very simple. It's common sense. History proves it. Paleo diet cannot prove it. Paleo science cannot prove it because they're looking and they're saying our ancestors, our forefathers, they were cavemen and they were chasing animals. Now, if we were to get this straight, cavemen, they probably didn't know how to make shoes. They didn't have guns. They didn't have arrows. They probably had very primitive tools to go hunting. How hard would it be for a man or a village of men to even get one deer barefoot in the middle of the winter, or running on thorns or stony ground? They all have dead and exhausted. And what happens even if we look right now in developing cultures where people are still living in tribal situations and they still hunt for a living, like literally. Men go on a hunt to go get 1 or 2 pigs, hogs from wherever they're getting it from. Meanwhile, the women are staying behind and they're raising children, taking care of themselves, and the elderly on all the plant foods, the berries, the fruits, the vegetables, the root vegetables. So while the men are gone to get the delicacy, they bring in what usually happens. The whole village gets together, they fry up the big hog, and everybody gets a bite, and it's all gone. And it's not like they're 24/7 always looking to kill an animal. It was their delicacy. They ate it, and that's why if you look at them, they're all thin and they're all in good health. And if anything, they just don't have enough or a good variety of foods to eat.
Exactly. So, that's what I think. I think you had these communities that did not have very sophisticated agricultural techniques. So they didn't have the variety of plant foods that we have available to us today. So you had these regions that might have been strong in some nutrient sources, but not in others. And so these people learn to compensate by eating meats. But then you get all these negative consequences, especially if you start making those meats your primary source. Exactly. So yeah.
Well, if we were to look at look at the North Pole, the populations that live there, the Inuits. Yes, they're primarily meat eaters. But let's go look at documentaries about them. They're missing their teeth. They're dying on the average by the age of 45 to 50. I mean, if you want to knock yourself out on meat, go ahead, but just know what's waiting for you out there. Now let's go to different regions, to Peru and other places, or to Japan, where a lot of people used to be, especially on the, what's the island called that has the most centurions? It's going to come.
Okinawa?
Okinawa.
Yep.
They're eating, primarily their diet consists of sweet potatoes. They're living to over 100 years old, and these people who, the only source of nutrients they have is some berries, and then a lot of, deer and elk and catching whatever fish, they're dying by the age of 50. Yeah. I mean, how much more proof do we need that it doesn't work?
Thank you. Yes. All right. So to shift gears a little bit, it seems, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your primary motivation for embarking on this journey were reasons for health, physical health. But it sounds like along the way, you became aware of some of the ethical issues associated with the production of animals. So tell us a little bit about what you learned in that regard and how you feel about the ethics of this whole animal production industry.
Yeah, I always tell people you can start this journey for selfish reasons, but eventually, if you're open-minded enough to hear the message, you're going to become ethical. You know, it's not that people that are not that are vegan for health reasons are not ethical. I mean, we're still saving lives, right? Even if you just do Meatless Monday, you're still being ethical, saving lives.
Right.
Here's the thing. One of the documentaries I watched, and I recommend it to everyone, it will break your heart, is called The Earthlings, right?
Yeah.
Everybody heard about it. Watch it. It will open up your eyes. And one of the things that I quickly realized right after going vegan, I think even before that, I read the China study and other books, and I thought, I don't have to eat somebody else in order to live. Why would I kill somebody in order to live? People don't look at it this way. So, for example, I had a 7-year-old niece for a visit today, and we're about to have a snack, and we pull out like watermelon and grapes and crackers for my daughter and those things. And my niece goes, "Chicken? You're going to have chicken?" I said, "No, we don't eat chicken here." She's like, "Why? It's so delicious. It's good for you." And she has baby goats as pets. So I said, "Well, chicken are animals and goats are animals. Would you like for somebody to come and kill your goats to have as a meal because they're delicious?" "No, they're my friends, they're my pets." And she said, and already at 7 years of age, that's how early we get inundated, indoctrinated with it. She said, "But chickens were created just for food."
Yeah.
7 years old. And I was not vegan for over 30 years of my age, so I'm having this conversation with her. Then I'm trying to explain about, there are also cows that are being killed for food. And we're talking about milk production. She said, "But milk is good for us and it doesn't hurt the cow." So I'm actually explaining to this child that it really hurts the cow to produce milk. And that the whole painful part of this process is that the cow has to give up its baby in order for humans to have milk. And that little calf is taken to slaughter because it's no longer needed. And it's hard for 7-year-olds to understand. And I was also, trying not to overstep my boundaries because it's my sister's job to do that.
Right.
But because she initiated the conversation at my house, it gave me permission in a very child-friendly format to speak to her. So on her level, was not using this language.
Right.
But just talking to her and seeing that because we're indoctrinated from early childhood, milk is good for you, meat is delicious, it's good for you. We numb that part of our heart and our emotions not to feel the pain of those animals. We become compassionate toward cats and dogs. We become compassionate toward goats, but, pigs, for some reason, they also have 4 legs and a cute tail and a cute face, and they show more emotion than a lot of animals. They are not good enough to have compassion toward it. And all of those things, once I asked and answered myself this question, do you have to kill somebody in order to live? When the answer was no, my heart just became open and I realized how horrible it is to put another being through pain, through process of death, through fear, because animals feel it. They know when they're about to get killed, especially cows. There are documentaries on it. And the horrific machine of animal manufacturing, really, of farming.
I love this term you're using to refer to animals as somebody. So, and that's really the whole thing. If you look at animals as a commodity, that's a certain frame of reference. If you recognize that an animal is a sentient being, and as you're describing, if you have any short association with an animal, it immediately becomes apparent that there's something more going on than you would find with a vegetable.
Right. And the thing is, usually, how it goes with kids. Parents say, "Don't name it because once you name it, it becomes your pet. We can never kill it after that."
Right.
But when it comes to calling animals it's an American thing. It's part of your language. Overseas in Russian language, we never refer to animals as it, only to inanimate objects, so the trees, the desk, whatever else. But animals were always gender specific, he or she.
Very interesting.
And I'm teaching my daughter the same thing. Although we speak English here, when we talk about animals, we never say it. We never call any breathing being that has blood and heart and mind it. We always call she or he, even when it comes to a worm in the ground.
This is excellent. This is excellent, Elena. I love this.
So I think it could be a shift in our language if we start this kind of revolution, just doing things differently, saying it differently, because there was a point in American unfortunate history during slavery when slaves were not considered humans. They were dehumanized in order to pacify oneself, to say, I can own slaves and not only own, I can sell them, I can make profit, I can kill them, I can do whatever it takes, because you numb that part of yourself. You don't look at something as living, being, breathing, feeling. Then your mind, humans can really numb that part of their mind. So then it's okay to impose pain on those beings. And that's what happened with human beings until the revolution came and said, no, we're all, we're all equal. We all have the rights. And now we are coming. And what I found, though, is there are organizations like PETA, and they're extreme vegans that will go, be out in the street naked and talking about animals. And I think works for some people. But what I found when I was coming into this, because I was coming into vegan diet and lifestyle for personal health reasons, for selfish reasons, they could not have touched my heart. So their message, as great as it is, I think it sometimes get overblown. And again, they reach some people as great. I'm all for their work, for what they do. But there's this new layer of society that is coming into this lifestyle because of health. And a lot of my clients come for selfish reasons, but in the process, we become this kind and gentle and ethical vegans that are compassionate. And we should not rule out a new approach saying, let's talk about what's good for you. And now that you understand what's good for you, let's talk about what's good for the planet. Yeah. And this is the next selfish reason. I want to leave this planet a better place for my daughter, for my grandchildren when they come. We know that animal farming has the largest carbon footprint anywhere in the world, even more than cars and planes and everything put together. They emit more gases than anybody else, and we're talking about manure and other things. Right. So we have to think about that. And then we have to say, okay, now let's look at these beings as beings and not. One of the people that came to my cooking class once said, she was not vegan, she said, I literally believe that God put cows on this planet only for food. Well, my question to her was then, and I come from a Christian background back then, I said, well, if God thought that cow was important for your food, why didn't he make cow grow on a tree so that this cow would not have to go through pain and the emotion of parenthood and separation and then pain of death? It just does not add up. And, I come, like I said, from Christian background. I could talk to Christians on that level and pull out the scriptures that will indicate that was not the optimal diet for humanity. Yeah. Now, I can also speak to people who are atheists from the environmental points of view. And, we can cross this divide, and we don't have to look at this as, I used to get hate mail from Christians, from not everybody, of course, but saying, you're the false prophet, you're telling people what not to eat, here's the scripture about you. I said, if you don't want this message, by all means, go knock yourself out. Do whatever your conscience allows you to, but question it. For me, I don't care if you say, you're cursed and whatever else. I'll be that false prophet that will save lives. Yeah. And
this is a huge point. And anybody who, I think if you're a religious person, then ethics are important to you. If you're of any religious belief, is and also many atheists are strongly ethical as well. But if you have a religious persuasion, of most religions that I can think of, there's a strong ethical element to them. And this ethics not only applies to how you treat these sentient beings, but it also applies in terms of the cost. So the illness and disease that arises from eating this way is a tremendous cost and burden to society, not only financially, but the suffering, just the suffering. If you're a Christian and you don't want people to suffer, this should be an interesting exploration for you.
But if I may interrupt, Paul, we are always blind to the truth as long as it benefits us. Just like the slave owners did not want to see the wrongdoing of their hands in their lives. Now people are saying, well, the Bible commands us, kill and eat, these are your food, and literally taking things out of context. And, given the thing that Bible has been written and rewritten in the last hundreds of years, and at one point the Vatican said, we can change the scripture whatever way we want to. We can say whatever we want to. We have the right to do so. So very few go back in history and say, what does the original writing, or as early as we can find, what did that say? And now let's go a step further and say, what kind of diet did people practice like at the time of Jesus, right?
Right.
So historically, I started digging in, And James, which is Jesus' brothers, who was in charge after Jesus died, he took over being the bishop of the church.
Early Christians. Yeah.
The early Christian church. They were all professed vegetarians. They did not eat animal foods.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. You will not find it because now it's written somewhere that Jesus ate fish and they were fishermen. You know, what do you mean by that? Well, their process through all this whole thing was compassion. And so the leader of the early church, he was a vegetarian. And then the Essenes also, that was a sect there. They were practicing vegetarians. They would not allow animal foods to cross their lips. And then if you look at Buddhism, which is 500 years older than Christianity, it also practices the art of compassion, really, toward all living beings. So when it comes to me, when I went through this process, I cannot see how. So I'm going to digress a little bit, and this will offend probably a lot of people who are listening to this special edition. So as Christians, a lot of times people would say, we value life, so all human life matters. We're going to save the babies and all. I'm taking a step further. I'm saying as vegans, we are pro-life. And so as a vegan, I'm pro-life not only for human life, I'm pro-life for animal life, because any life that was worth creating is worth honoring. And with that, I don't allow my child to kill a bug outside, because every bug has a purpose. I mean, when a bug is biting my child, it's a different deal. I mean, I get non-vegan there for a few, but, you know, I will kill a mosquito. You know, hate me all you want.
Yeah.
Or if a bee's stinging me, I'm sorry, I'm going the winner on this one. But what I'm teaching my child is life of non-aggression. And the law of non-aggression says that unless somebody is hurting you, you have absolutely no reason to hurt it or him or her back. Yes. And so the animals really have not deserved anything to be hurt unless they become violent and they're about to attack somebody. Then, of course, whether it's human or somebody else, if somebody's attacking my family, I'm sorry, my family comes first.
Sure, of course. And I do
I think we just need to open our mind and say, what if everything I've been taught is wrong? And just go from that premise and say, I'm going to be open-minded. I don't have to change my mind today. I don't have to become vegan today. But let me think from a perspective of a different person. And that's what I did with myself. I said, what if I was taught wrong, but not on purpose? So it's not like my parents said, oh, let me teach her how to eat animals. They passed down what they were taught. I was going to pass down what I'm taught to my child, but I changed. And now she's going to pass down, hopefully, to her children what I'm teaching her. So it's just questioning what has come before us. Was it the optimal way for what is to be done for now and in the future?
That's right. I think there's a kind of hierarchy of consciousness. And I think, I do think humans are at a higher level of consciousness than an animal, but an animal is at a much higher level of consciousness than a plant. And this is important when you're considering, how to value these things. I mean, of course, they're all invaluable in a sense. And I think there's a positive movement within the Christian church of this idea of stewardship of the planet.
Yes.
Being a good steward of this beautiful planet. So, because if we're not, we could easily destroy it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. So when I first started, it's almost 9 years ago. I got to a point that I separated myself from Christian community when it came to my diet totally, because I got so much resentment and I didn't ask for it. And I said pretty much like, shake my hands off, I'm going to the world, whoever's going to listen. But what I was saying is we have this genesis happening in the Christian community, that the new generation that is coming in saying we want to be kinder to the planet. We want to do better. And now there's this whole new movement where people are doing the Daniel fast for like a month out of a year or for 21 days. And then they're seeing improvement in their health. And they're saying,
what's the name of that, Elena? What kind of fast is that?
The Daniel fast. So like the Daniel that is the book of Daniel in the Bible.
Daniel's diet, yep.
Yeah, so and that's one of the reasons people end up on my website, because I have this huge article about how to do the Daniel fast, right? And then it gives you an opportunity to talk about, to people more about that. And I have an ebook on Daniel fast. And so they feel all of a sudden they've been, those who believe in miracles, they'll say, I've been praying for healing and it never happened, but look, I'm eating now and I'm feeling so much better. And then we have this opportunity to talk about what's optimal for you, what's optimal for the planet. So I'm very happy about what is going on in the Christian community right now. Is there's this awakening about stewardship, about taking care of what we have, because we're responsible for our children's future. The generation before us and our current generation is still going through this. This is our planet. We're going to do whatever the heck we want with it as long as we can enjoy ourselves and make money and whatever else. The generation of the 20-something and 30-something right now is coming through saying that's not good enough anymore. We are globally minded people. We're no longer, this is our country, this is our city, this is my home, because we see this global community as our home, and we are better off for that. Yeah,
it's a very interesting time. There's some very interesting things are shifting and changing in society and consciousness. So there was one other thing I've lost now. But anyway, so great topics. Is there anything, if I can shift a little bit, is there anything you would recommend people who are considering this approach, just some basic tips when they make this transition to make it easier for them?
If they're just considering, I always tell people, try it out for a month. And when you give yourself permission to say, I'm going to try it, if I don't like it, I'm going to leave, then you're okay. When people overcommit and say, I'm going to do this no matter what, and they freak out literally, that's a human psyche. It's kind of like the Last Supper syndrome. I'm about to get killed. Let me go pick out on all the foods I can have, right?
Right.
I always tell people is into it. And so there are several categories of people. There's the A-type personality right here that says, if I'm going to do it, I'm going into all the way. I'm done forever. Bam. We're done overnight. Works for us. Then there are people who just need encouragement, and they'll say, okay, I'm going to try this out. And if it works, then I'll continue with it. If it doesn't. And then there's a group of people that say, there's no way I'm doing it. So we ease them into it. So we will go say, let's exclude all the junk first. The next week we'll say, let's do away with all of the dairy. Then we're going to cut down on meat. And then let's try a couple of weeks without meat and see how you do.
I love that.
And so whatever works for you, we need to be on a person's level, because it's their psyche, it's their personality, it's their religion, it's everything else. We need to be gentle and we need to be considerate. And there has been a lot of face slapping going on from the vegan community, to the point that people are called murderers and rapists and arsonists just by treating animals the wrong way or eating animals. And I think it's time for a new generation to come and say, let's try this. Let's get educated in the process. So when we do this with my clients, I provide them with so much educational information. We talk about protein, we talk about carbs and fats, B12. We cover all the basic topics that are the reason they worry about going vegan. Am I going to get deficient? So we talk about that. So with education comes power.
I like this, Elena, because what you're implying is, while perhaps this method of castigating people for eating meats works for some, for the most part, it's off-putting. It doesn't respect the person as a human being. It also doesn't take into account for the fact that most of us at one time were eating meat ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think what is kind of controversial about this is because the purpose, we're preaching compassion toward the animals, but then we're in compassion toward our human fellows.
Right.
We can't do it. We cannot do it with us. And I've seen this happen in religion and other aspects and other things. We cannot conquer hate and pain with pain and hurt and hate. We have to conquer hate with love. It worked for Gandhi. It worked for MLK Jr. It worked for others. It will work in this too. Let's conquer ignorance that is not done by choice, but it's just by our bringing with education and compassion and patience and love. And what with my program and my mentor, she does that a lot, and others, we don't demand that people go vegan to be healthy. We give them the science. And what we do create in the process is a lot of accidental vegans, because people realize they've been doing this. It's like, oh, I forgot when I ate meat for the last time, and I'm okay now. I no longer need it. So when I did a survey of my clients after 2 years after they worked with me, I found out that 75% of them maintain a vegan lifestyle. That's a huge success rate. Even if it were 50%, that would still be huge. Yeah. But the thing is, others, they say, I still incorporate all the main points, or some will say, I just have a couple of servings of meat per week. I mean, by that, we still have saved millions, if not billions, of animal lives in the process.
Yeah.
But if we just said you're an outcast because you still eat meat, all of a sudden we turn them off to the message. Now their health is going down the drain. Their family is going to suffer financially. Nobody's better off. So I'm just saying we need to change the approach and keep the message pure, but change the approach.
Yes, I love it. I love that. It's like a gentle invitation and education. Since you brought up all these clients you've had over these years, can you state for us quickly what are some of the things you've seen people overcome in terms of illness by taking on this way of life?
Absolutely. So some of the easiest ones, they come, they want to lose weight. Sure, let's work on it. They lose weight. They start sleeping better, more energy, skin clears out. So we got rid of acne very quickly. Insomnia, gout, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, totally different animal. We can improve it, cannot cure it. I had a lot of autoimmune diseases, hypothyroidism, celiac, others that we work with. People would improve, infertility. The fastest one was 2 weeks. I started working with a young lady. She was actually a vegan, couldn't get pregnant for 5 years or so. And we cleaned up her diet from junk and sugar. And 2 weeks later, she literally got pregnant.
Wow.
The longer ones take me sometimes 6 months to a year to get better. And because it's just the longer your body is sick, the longer it takes sometimes. So those kind of diseases. And one of the most notable ones is I had a gentleman, physics professor came. And he was to the point he was almost in a wheelchair. He had an autoimmune disease that was taking his life. And at one point, he tried a paleo diet, and he was okay for several months. And he was preaching and teaching this diet to others. And then it overworked his body, and he started feeling worse instead of better. So doctors couldn't help. Paleo didn't help. He somehow stumbled upon my website. He was like, "You're my last hurrah. Let's try this." So we cleaned out his diet. And so he was a physics professor, and he also owned a martial arts studio, which he could no longer enjoy because he was almost in a wheelchair. So within a couple of weeks of us starting to work together, he was walking with a cane and then cane free. And then he was again, and as long as he followed the plant-based diet that was also gluten-free because he had an autoimmune disease, then he was doing great. So anytime he misbehaved, his body let him know. Anytime he was doing okay, he was doing great. So yeah, it was all of those kind of things. Blood pressure. I actually worked with people who had cancer, who are cancer-free now. And just to clear that, I'm not a medical doctor, so I never say, you have a disease, come see me. I always said, you can work with your doctor, but let's see if diet does not help you to feel better. And 80% to 90% of the time, diet helps people. There's 10% I have very difficult clients with very difficult health issues where we have to go outside and say, at this point, you do need some medication to stay better. But that's always our last resort, not the first one. So we go for the lowest hanging fruit, which is diet, exercise, lifestyle changes, getting rest, getting, emotionally all tuned up. And then if everything fails, there's always an improvement. It just depends how much. But if there's a remnant of symptoms that debilitate and affect your lifestyle, we'll always say, okay, let's go talk to your doctor. Maybe it's time.
Yeah. I love it. Let me ask you lastly, Elena, you seem to have been pretty successful in your business approach to this, and maybe that's a little bit attributed to your A-type personality, as you say. But tell us a little bit about how you have succeeded. So you got a beautiful website. I highly recommend viewers to check it out. It's gorgeous. How did you develop these business techniques, and have you found that pursuing health, is that your sole career? Is that the only thing you do, or is that a sideline for you? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I started in this, I fell into it for about, let's say, I was getting well. I was already cured hypothyroidism on myself. And this was just, I think, like divine opportunity almost. My nephew comes to me and says, well, you're looking great. You're feeling great. I want to lose weight. What do I do? Give me a recipe. I got tired of saying, okay, here's the recipe. I said, how about this? Because I worked in photography before and I had a photography blog, I knew how to run that site. I started with a free blog and I would post my recipes and start talking about it. And somehow people began to find me. And then I had enough recipes to put a green smoothie book together. And people said, what if we do this? And eventually I started getting emails and they would take more and more of my time. And I got a lot of painful, like making you cry, boohoo tears. It's not coming out of your nose, emails about pain and suffering. And I said, you know, it's starting to take so much of my time, but I have my life, I have my career to run, I have a husband. I need to do something about it. I need to start charging people to justify me spending 5 hours a day on the computer answering emails. So it started small. I used to spend more money on the business, you know, for running the website, equipment for photography and other things, for hosting and everything else that comes with it. Then I was making it. So it used to cost me, but I thought that if I am to help people, which is my passion, and regardless whether health, fitness, finances, whatever, I love helping people, then I need to make sure that's a win-win situation, because if I just charge them and don't provide services, they lose. If they get all the benefit and I work like a horse, but I don't get paid, I lose. So what's a win-win situation to make it affordable, but to make it worth my time so I can do this? So I did not do this overnight. It took me several years before I said, okay. Right before I got pregnant, I decided to take some time off from corporate America. I was in education, and I was in banking business before this. I have a physics degree, so this was kind of like left field altogether. And I just became a fitness trainer. I said, part-time, this is what I'm going to do. I just thought maybe my body needed to heal. I needed to do research. And so I took about 6 months off. And so I was working part-time. And then I decided to give it this more of like, I'm going to spend more time purposefully. This is what I'm going to do. And just like anything in my life, I research, how do I do this right? And we're talking about, how do I write better as a writer? How do I communicate with people? How do I market myself? And I always have this approach to marketing. I don't ever sell a used car to somebody, right? I always sell them exactly what they need, and only for as long as they need. And I always tell people, when they don't need me anymore, I sell, you don't need me, you can do this on your own. I don't like being duped into anything. So my principle in business to be as honest as possible and as moral as possible. So I tell somebody, if I cannot work with them, I won't work with them. If we're not a good fit, I will tell them. So sometimes I do turn away now. I use some of the ads on my website. I used to be like totally anti-ad, but you know, we have to pay for our websites. We have to include it. But I always look out on things. People email me and say, okay, can you write an ad for us or write a post for us? We'll pay you. And if it doesn't go hand in hand with what we just talked about for the last 2 days with you, then I don't do it. Money or no money. So I keep my ethics as pure as possible. Yeah. So whoever started in this business, there's more to learn. 8 years ago, it was as simple as you start writing a blog, you know, cell phone picture that is this big, people will come and read it. Competition is totally on right now. You have to have good photography. You have to have good videography. Your website has to look good, and it has to be easy to navigate. So you have to be savvy. You have to be smart. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to go to business school. I didn't go, but, you know, it helped that I was in banking before. But it just realizing that you can do only so much work for free. And eventually what I found, whenever I did pro bono work with my clients, they never valued it enough to stick with it. So I used to give away free stuff regularly. I used to have free consultations, and then it became a waste of my time and energy. And I thought, and I heard this from people, oh, we cannot afford you, but then we'll see they go on vacation to, like, you know, Florida or overseas. What I realized is people will always put their money where their values are. So if they think I'm expensive right now, if they cannot afford me, their values are not there, because the same people will have probably, most people, not everybody, they'll have enough money to go get their nails done, hair done, and go to a fast food place or just go out to eat. If you take the same money and save it for a month, you can afford me and whatever other specialists you have in the field. It doesn't have to be me. What we learn is just charging somebody for services actually helps them to value their investment so much more and makes them more successful at this. So yeah, this is kind of the business side. It's ongoing learning. I'm a part of a blogging community also that is concentrated more on food. So I had to learn how to take beautiful pictures of food. You know, it doesn't come naturally. I used to take pictures of people. Now it's food. It's a different approach. And now I'm getting more into videography. So you need to learn, you know, what cameras and lenses we use. It's a process.
Yeah.
With this technology, you never arrive. So there's never going to be a time where I say, okay, I've learned enough. I think I'll be 90 years old and still kicking, like clicking away and checking out websites. I spend an average about 2 hours a day educating myself about technology, about what's going on in the nutrition world. And then I spend the rest writing and talking back to clients and getting posted videos ready. So I work on average about 5 hours plus a day. But a lot of it happens at night while my family is sleeping, so I'm always underslept.
All right. Well, Elena, it's a real pleasure. We probably could do many, many topics. One that I didn't get a chance to do, and maybe sometime in the future, if you have time, you'd let me. I think it would be interesting to discuss the raising of your child as a vegan and some of the special aspects of that.
Yeah, and if I may mention this, we should do that. But Facebook, this is another things that business people can utilize. That came out with live broadcasting right now. So I did my first one last week. It was great. People came out, asked questions. I just do live Q&A. And then I surveyed my readers, and this is one of the things they want to know. So next week, so every week or every other week, I'll be doing a live Q&A during weekdays, and sometimes on the weekend I'll do a cooking class in my kitchen live. So if your readers want to, they can follow my Facebook page. And sorry for the shameless plug here, but this is...
No, I was about to ask you anyway. So if you could name the Facebook page and also your website, your book, anything that's up.
Yeah, if you go to my website, everything is there. I don't want to give you too much. I can send you the links, but so it's Vegalicious. Vegalicious.com was taken. Sorry, people. So I had to do hyphenated vega-licious.com.
Right.
And all of the links to my Facebook page, to my Twitter page. I am now on Snapchat and Instagram, and that's what would drive you crazy as a business person. You have to be everywhere, but it's there. And if you just Google me anywhere, Elena Wilkins or Elena Vegalicious, I'll come up. And Facebook and Google pops up first. I'll be easily found. And yes, I will be doing a lot of live chats like this with people in my kitchen or like this answering questions, because this is what we've come to. I've communicated with people from around the world. I've had clients from at least like 20 different countries, I think. And it's the benefit because we're no longer confined to being healthy in just one place in the world.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Elena, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.